It all started back in October of 1999, October 3rd, 1999. I remember it very clearly. It was a Sunday. My parents, I think we went to church, we came back. I used to go to a church, Ekwa Ikoyi was the name, back in Lagos State in Nigeria. And my parents brought me back. I mean, we went to school, went to church, and then they took me to school, Federal Government College, Ijanikin, Lagos. I remember that day very well. And met a few of my friends, still remember them, still keep in touch with most of them. And they put me in room 2. I remember that. I was in El Kanemi house. And what was very interesting was, that's my first day now going to a boarding school. I went to Efforts Primary School, Victoria Island, Lagos, and I did my 1st grade to 5th grade, all my studies there from 1994 to 1999, and then I took the National Common Entrance exam, which is an exam that allows you to go into high school. Now, in October of 1999, I went to Federal Government College, Lagos, which was a school way out, far away from the city of Victoria Island, which was where I went to my elementary school. And so I went into school that day, and I loved it. It was wonderful. Of course, the first night everybody cries, and that's usual. I mean, everybody's, your parents drop you off and they go, and then the next time you see them would be like the end of November or something. And so it was kind of, or maybe the visiting day period where they would come on a Sunday, the 3rd Sunday of the month. So I did that for 6 years, but I'm just going to break the story down. The first year, which was, they dropped me off, I was placed in a class called JSS1F, which meant Junior Secondary School 1F. So you go from JSS 1 all the way to Senior Secondary School 3. So we have 6 years of high school essentially. And I went to JSS 1F, and I was a pretty good student. I didn't cause any trouble. And I was made the doorkeeper, I think was the position or something. I was the guy who opened the class and locked the class. Even though I really wanted to be the class captain, but my friend Henry got the position, and I'm happy for him. It was very good times back then. And I did that from JSS 1, I was the door guy. And then in JSS 2, I think I got a little promotion. I don't remember what it was, but I was still there. Now, in JSS 3, which was the 3rd, so you have 1, 2, 3, and then you get a break, and then you do another 1, 2, 3, senior secondary now. And so in JSS 3, we finished all we needed to do and so on. And my parents were actually going to move to Abuja, which is the capital of Nigeria. And I wanted to move so bad. I didn't want to stay. I think I was done with my years. My brother Emmanuel actually was a student at Federal Government College, Lagos, and he became the school captain or student body president. And so I got to enjoy the benefits of that, and that was wonderful. But I wanted to leave and move to a different state, or to a different place, Abuja, the capital. And so my dad sent me, I told my dad and my mom, and they told me, well, you go check and see if there's any schools that you can go into. And so I went to Abuja and I looked for all these schools to try to get into and to continue my education essentially, but all of them turned me down, and it was very sad. It was terrible. I didn't like it because I didn't want to go back to Federal Government College, Lagos. Till today, I really don't know why I was trying to run away, because again, my brother was the school captain, so I enjoyed a lot of things. And there was no reason to run away, but I just wanted to go away. So I told all my friends, bye-bye, I love you, I don't really like you, but I won't see you again, so I can say what I want. And I left, thinking that was the end. And I remember clearly, that was in June of 2002. I checked, I didn't find any schools, it was terrible. Finally I had to come back in September of 2002. And I walked into the school premises, I remember that day, and everybody was, okay, what's going on? We thought Amos left and so on. But I came back, and it was a humbling experience, and I thank God for it. I came back to Federal Government College, Lagos, to complete my studies. I had actually filled out a form saying that I wasn't going to come back again, but all this happened, and then I came back. But from that, God taught me a lot of things. But apart from that, He also opened many doors from that experience. Let me explain how that has led me to where I am right now. When I went back to Federal Government College, Lagos, I did my Senior Secondary School 1, 2, and 3 there. So when I got to Senior Secondary School 1, came in late, and so I wasn't the class captain, which was something I really wanted to do. I wanted to serve the class as a class captain. And I remember that I came late, so I didn't get the position. But toward the end of the first term, I got a chance to serve. I did some work, and then finally they gave me the position to be the class captain, and that was just wonderful. I loved it. I did my best. We always swept the class on time, which was something we did. We didn't vacuum the classroom, we actually swept it. And so I did my job, and I did everything well, and I had a lot of friends. and enemies. But that went well, and then finally the end of the semester, the end of the year came, and the teacher was very happy with what I did, and I thank God for that. And she said that was the best class captain I've ever had, and so that kind of made me happy, and life went on. Now, when I moved to senior secondary school too, that was the class. Or it's when you're in your senior secondary school too that you get to pick. That's where they pick the student body president from, and the school captain, and all. I mean, all of that. You get prefects, which is, it's just wonderful being a prefect. Apart from the extra food you get, there's other things. But I'm just saying, it was good doing that. Now, in senior secondary school too, I was the class captain. I started out as the class captain, and I did some things. You know, it was great. I had very good friends. And the second term came around, and that's when you choose the prefects. And so the period came. They did the elections. And to God be the glory, I got the student body president position, and that was a surprise. I think it was March 8, 2004. It was a Monday morning, and I remember clearly when they called it, and it was one of the best days of my life. And I thank God for that over and over again. But again, we know that this could not have happened if I didn't come back to the school. But I came back, and God made a way, and I became the student body president. Now, what does that have to do with me being here? When I became the student body president, I had to share ideas and thoughts with my prefects every week. I had about 54 people I worked with to take care of the school. There's about 2,000 students or so, 2,000 students who were in the boarding house. And so we would take care of, they come to the meals, we make sure everybody gets something to eat. The key word is something. At least you get something to eat. And then we also take care of making sure that they go to things on time. They go to their study hall on time. They go to the sporting events on time and things like that. So prefects did a lot of things, and pretty much anything after 3 o'clock or after 2:30, the prefects do, like, they take care of things from 2:30 all the way to 10 p.m. and then from 5 a.m. all the way till 8 a.m. And so we do all those things with the students, and I had to, in a sense, motivate and encourage the prefects. And I started doing that on Saturday night meetings. I remember some of the meetings went late and so on. And I did a lot of those talks, and then I remember giving a speech in front of the school on several occasions on just telling the students how to behave and making sure they behave well. I did all of that, and I graduated in July of 2005. I applied to the University of Jos, and so I was waiting for them. The Jos is the capital of the state, Plateau State in northern Nigeria. And so I applied there. I went there for my post-UME exams or post-UME interview, and I wanted to study medicine. So I applied for that, and that didn't turn out too well. I had to wait till July of 2006 to find out if I was accepted, actually. So essentially from July of 2005 to 2006, that took some time. But in 2005, I was mostly at home, but then I got involved with a few youth groups. And then in 2006, I went to a church service at Ekwa Wuse 2, which is the church I attended. And I attended Ekwa Wuse 2 until 2007. But in 2006, I remember it was Elder Okpanachi that preached that day. His name is Isaac Okpanachi, and he preached, and I don't remember what the topic was, but I know that he had finished, and then, or before he started, we sang a song. Our God is an awesome God. I believe Rich Mullins is the one who sang the song, or who wrote the song. But we sang that song, and I believe in my heart, and I knew it beyond a doubt that God was calling me to do something. And that was kind of, I had to, in a sense, answer, what am I going to do about what God has told me? I knew that He had called me to reach out to the youth in my area, and so I used to live in Kuje, I live in Kuje in Abuja, and so I decided to see what I could do in Kuje. And so what I decided to do was, the next day I went to the principal of the vice principal of the government secondary school in Kuje, and I told him, can I give a talk to your students? I want to encourage them. And he was wondering, where are you from? What's the talk going to be about? And so I told him I was a student body president, and essentially, which kind of implied that I was somewhat responsible. And so I told him, by God's grace, I got a chance to lead or be a leader at my school. And he gave me a chance, but he told me to write down all that I wanted to say. So I got to work, and I started writing, and by God's grace, I wrote over almost up to 50 pages. I hand wrote the whole book that I was working on to encourage the students. And so we typed it up, it became a book, and he gave me a chance to speak at the end of January of 2006. So I gave a talk at this school, and then I was invited to give a talk at a different school, and I did it in several schools, Fontage and Government Secondary School, Tudunwada, and just different schools and different settings, some talks to prefects, some to all the students. And God opened a lot of doors with that, and I just knew that God was behind it, and I thank Him for all of that. Now, you have to remember that a lot of these talks were based on the talks I gave when I was the student body president back in my high school. And so I wrote all of them out, and I still have all the manuscripts actually. I wrote all those things out, and then in 2006, February of 2006, I got a call, or someone invited me and said, "Do you want to talk about going to school in the United States?" And I said, "Well, sure, I've never thought about it, but I'll give it a try." And so they had noticed that I was quite serious about making an impact, and they gave me a list of schools, and I met Dr. Obaka in 2006, February, and he and I talked, and we decided, maybe going to the US might be a good idea. He talked to my parents, and we moved on, and I wrote down all the speeches, or most of what I had shared with the high schools, and I had that ready to be published. However, I also, now that the US was going to the US for my university education was now there, I decided to start studying for the SATs and so on. And I did all of that, and then finally I was given a list of schools to apply to. One of them was the University of Evansville, Indiana. The other one was the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, I believe. And then there was the Duville College in New York, Monmouth University in New Jersey, Seaver College in California, and the University of Wisconsin Superior. Well, the University of Wisconsin Superior had a very colorful brochure. I just stood out, and I was like, "This is great. This has to be a great school." And I just took it, and then I think Dr. Obaka had mentioned to me once, if you go in January, it's a little cold, and I was like, "Don't worry, I'll be fine." And so I didn't care. I wanted to go in January, so I didn't really want to wait for anything. I just got to work. I applied. I got into most of these schools. Some of them I didn't apply to at all, but some of them I got into. A lot of them I did get into, but I just wanted Superior. There was something about Superior. I got accepted, and I said, "You know what? I just want to go here. It's a small school, small classes. I'm going to study chemistry and become a pediatrician after I go to med school." And so that was kind of the mindset I came with. And in January, so I accepted that offer, and I said, "Okay, I'm going to go to Superior." And so in January of 2007, I published my first book. I took all the talks and I made it into a book, which was called Achieving Excellence as a Young Person. That became my first book. And it was, I thank God for how it did. I just printed 1,000 copies. I didn't really have a system of doing more copies, but I thank God for the opportunity I got to write that book, and I left in January of 2007. I got into the United States on the 12th of January 2007. I was a chemistry student, a chemistry major, pre-med, and I took all the classes and so on and so forth. Now, the key thing to remember is that right from when I was in high school, I always knew I had a heart for young people, working with young people, encouraging young people. But I didn't know if I wanted to do it from a doctor perspective, medical doctor, where I treat them, or do it from a PhD perspective, where I teach them chemistry. Some of you might think, oh, that's more of inflicting pain on them, but no, I just teach them chemistry or encourage them in math, or just do it from a youth worker perspective. And so those are the questions I was struggling with through college. And finally, when I took philosophy in 2009, it became very clear to me that if I was to become a doctor, I would get into too many debates, which would mean that my patients would not get treated on time because I'm debating them. And so I said, you know what, I'm just going to step into the PhD realm. So on April 1st, 2009, after praying and considering all those options and so on, I knew that God was calling me to something else and not to the MD program. And so I stepped aside and I finished my chemistry major degree, but I didn't I didn't intend to go on for an MD anymore. I just decided I was going to do the PhD route. And so I got to work. I started figuring out what to do and how to reach out to the youth in my generation. And I thank God for how all that worked out, because the moment I stepped away from the MD, it was like a load, just a heavy load was taken off. It was like I was trying to do it to please somebody, not for the right reasons. And that's very dangerous, because we don't want to succeed in what God has not called us to, because the worst kind of failure is when we succeed in the wrong thing. That's just terrible. We're wasting your energy in a sense. And I didn't want to waste my energy, so I wanted to do what God wanted me to do. And that was when I decided I'm going to go this route where I'm going to have more time with the youth. I'm just going to pour out all my energy in what He has called me to do. It's not about what He has called me to do versus comparing myself to somebody else. No, comparisons are dangerous. So I wanted to be careful to do what God called me to do. Let me take a second to talk about comparisons, and then I'll finish my story. What's interesting is that God has something for us to do individually, okay, and as a group. And when we think that, I really want to do or outdo this person, and we are actually maybe doing more things than the other person is doing. So for example, maybe we're going to more places and talking in more places, and we think, whoa, I'm on track to success because I'm doing better than the other person. What we forget is that our standard shouldn't be compared to them, it should be compared to what God has. And when we try to compare ourselves to others, we might actually be limiting ourselves. The reason why we're limiting ourselves is God might want us to be at a very high level here, doing something specific to what He has designed us to do. And we're comparing ourselves to someone who God hasn't called to do that specific thing. And so we look down and we're like, yep, I'm doing better than you. That means I'm successful. No. Maybe what God is calling you to do is even way higher up there. So instead of looking down and trying to compare ourselves with others, we should look up and see what God is calling us to do, because that's what matters, not what another person is doing. God has given us something specific. We should spend time with Him in the Word and in prayer every day to see that, Lord, am I walking in the vision You have for me? Am I doing the things You want me to do? And not comparing ourselves with others. That's dangerous, and the Bible warns against that. So for me, at that point, I started learning this truth of, I really can't sit here comparing myself to others. I need to focus on what God has called me to do. And so in April of 2009, I stepped out in faith and believing that God would, help me and encourage me to be who He created me to be. And so I started working on my second book. And then during the summer of 2009, with the help of some friends and support and so on, I decided to just stay and write. And so I wrote a book called Christianity 201, The Pursuit of Excellence. And that came out in 2010 actually. And that's the second book, which I'll be addressing in the next video. And so again, in April of 2009, I switched to the PhD route. I decided that I wanted to focus more on getting a PhD in philosophy of science and integrating it with apologetics and using that to encourage believers all over the world. And God made it clear to me that He was calling me away from the MD track, which I was trying to do that for the wrong reasons. I was trying to go to med school for reasons that I believe were not the right reasons. And I thought about it, I prayed about it, and finally April 1st, 2009, I made that decision to honor God in serving the youth. I graduated from college in 2010, May of 2010, with a degree in chemistry. I had a minor in philosophy, and my goal was to take science and philosophy and look for how those point us to God and not away from Him, because ultimately if science is what it is, and if God is who He is, then science cannot be in conflict with God, because the Bible makes it clear that the heavens declare the glory of God. So science ought to point to God and not away from Him. And so I did some research into that, and I said, I'm going to focus more on apologetics and reaching out to the youth. In 2009, I did publish my second book, which I titled Christianity 201, The Pursuit of Excellence, and I touched on this earlier. But in this book, I list off a few issues that I believe every Christian should think about and process. And I also describe what it means to be a follower of Jesus according to what the Bible teaches. And that's what the second book was about. I graduated in 2010 and I got a job with the university working as a research assistant, doing research on E. coli and gene deletion and so on. And I did some of that for a while, and I also got the chance to work with firm in a chemistry lab with a firm in Superior, Wisconsin. I did that, but I always wanted to teach, but I didn't know how I would get about it or what to do that. And so I started looking into the options, because I wanted to teach at a college level, so I wanted to get my PhD for that. But I also wanted to teach on the high school level, and I knew that you needed to have like a state license and so on. But as it worked out, I went to speak at a high school, a private school, Lakeview Christian Academy. And I was told about an opportunity, a science and math teaching opportunity, and so I thought about it, and at first I didn't think I was going to do it, but then when I found out that I would be given the opportunity, I thought, why not? So I went ahead with that, and I thank God for that. It's been great working with the youth at Lakeview Christian Academy. But also I started thinking of what I'm doing in terms of my education, and what I decided to do was the apologetics programs and a lot of the programs I wanted to do, or I want to do, are available online, and there's through distance learning and also just taking classes online. So I decided to pursue that track while teaching. And so God willing, in terms of my educational goals, I have about 7 degrees that I hope to get for the glory of God that would be of help and support as I seek to build high schools and elementary schools all over the world for the glory of God. And I just pray that God gives me wisdom as I take that track. But the moment I turned and started walking in the direction He had told me to walk in, everything started making sense. Everything was clear. This is where God wants me to go, and I'm excited about it. In terms of writing books, God willing, I hope to do 1 or 2 books a year to encourage young people in their faith and just to encourage people to make an impact. Because God gives us one life, and we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do with this life that He has given us? We have one life, and it's not something that we can just play around with. We need to actually wake up and ask ourselves, what is God calling me to do? What am I doing about it? And so I pray that you will ask God that question, that you would seek the face of the Lord and just ask Him, what do you want me to do with the life that you've given me? And I pray that we will do that daily. I hope we never get carried away into doing the things that we want to do or we want to get credit for, and we turn and start doing the things that He wants us to do so that He's glorified. Through all of this, let me just mention at this point that I've learned a lot of things, and through this journey, and by God's grace, I know I'll learn many more. Nobody's doubting that. But let me add this point here. In the world today, many people think that when you're young, you just need to chill, party, and essentially do what you want to do instead of seeking the face of the Lord. The Bible doesn't say that if you are 10 and below or 15 and younger, you don't need to seek the face of the Lord. The Bible makes it clear that once we start thinking, once we start learning what is right and wrong and so on, our focus should be, Lord, I want to live for you. Father, I want to glorify you. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 10:31 that whether we eat or we drink or whatever we do, we should do it all to the glory of God. And I just pray that we will have that attitude of seeking to do all to the glory of God. He has given us one life. He has given us an opportunity to make an impact. The question is, what are you going to do with that life? What am I going to do with that life? Am I going to sit around, or am I going to wake up and do what God has called me to do? We get to live in one generation, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4, 5, or 6. But what happens 20 generations later? Will people see that you live for the glory of God? Yes, your name might not be in all the places you want it to be, but those who you lived with and those who you spent time with and those who you interacted with, will they see that you love Jesus? Will they see that you wanted to make an impact for His glory? These are questions that I think we need to consider. I know that we're not reminded of them enough on a daily basis, but I pray that we'll make time every day to pray and to seek the face of the Lord and just ask Him for grace to be who He made us to be. C.S. Lewis said in his book, Mere Christianity, that when you build a machine to run on something, it only makes sense that you give it that thing that you made it to run on. If you build a car to run on gasoline, it only makes sense that the car run on gasoline. I mean, it makes sense that you put gasoline in the car and treat it that way instead of putting water or anything else that might not be good for it. That's the same thing with us. God built us and made us so that we will be dependent and trusted. We will depend and trust in Him, because it's only in Him that we can find true life. And this is the question we have to ask ourselves. What are we going to do about that? Are we going to focus on Him, or are we going to focus on the things that we want to do without giving Him the glory for it? Let me end with this thought. When God calls a man to do something, that man should be careful, or that woman, they should be careful not to compare themselves with others. Because in comparing themselves with others, they might be limiting themselves, because God has called them to do something specific. I pray that we wouldn't sit down comparing ourselves or comparing our stories, thinking that, oh, that person's story is better than mine, or that person has more gifts than I have. Instead, I pray we will turn to Him and ask Him for grace to live for Him alone. We're never too young to start seeking the Lord. We're never too young to start living for Him, living with wisdom, because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. And I pray that we will start trusting in God and seeking to be more like Jesus. In his book, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis ends the book by reminding us that when we look within ourselves, when we look at ourselves only, most times, all the time, we'll find loneliness, we'll find rage, we'll find all this sin in us. But when we look to Jesus, we'll find life, and with Him we get everything else. Our joy, our peace, our hope, everything is in Jesus. And when we go to Him, He gives us a life to live, and He gives us a project. He gives us a vision to carry on. And I pray that we will seek Him for that, and that we will do that with the life He has given us. I thank God for the journey He has taken me through. It's not always been easy. It's been difficult over and over again. But His grace is sufficient, and He is the one that I trust in. And I pray that you will also trust in Him, since He is the giver of all good things.